sign off in the chat of the event, if you can see us and hear me well. Hopefully everything's great. Yeah, we're gonna start in just a minute. I see 25 people. Perfect. Hopefully everyone can hear and see me well. Okay, I think we can start, and then people will join us in the process. Good night, everyone. Hopefully everything's okay. Everyone had a productive week, even though we still have to work tomorrow. Let's be real, nobody works that hard on Friday. So technically, mentally, we're already on the weekend, we're already on break. So let's finish this week with something positive and interesting. So as had been asked before, the topic of today's webinar is influencer marketing. How can we analyze and predict brand-focused campaign? Obviously, influencer marketing is extremely difficult to measure, just like majority of anything brand-focused, any brand-focused communication. We've known this far, so tonight we wanted to share some specific, models, frameworks, something you can use in your daily work. Before that, we're going to speak about a bit about the reasons why it's important to spend more resources, both mental and financial, on branding, and also how can you take the models and sort of like ideas that we share on this webinar and don't just passively watch them, but actually be able to apply them to your daily work. So just a quick shameless plug-in before we start. Why Zorka? Zorka is the worldwide smart, efficient, worldwide influencer marketing agency. We've launched over our existence more than 1,000 influencer marketing campaigns for mobile games and apps of every genre, of every vertical, in almost every location. We're quite efficient. We've been collecting a lot of data, a lot of cases, a lot of experiences in order to be able to construct several models with benchmarks and predictors. How can we, run our campaigns even more effectively? How can we find even better influencers? And we're worldwide. We're actively present in the United States, in Europe, in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in Middle East, pretty much all over the world. And then quickly, why me specifically? I'm the head of strategy at Zorka. I've been working with Zorka for almost 2 years. And together with them, I've launched more than 30 sort of like big influencer marketing / branding campaigns, and obviously a lot of other smaller performance and UA-based opportunities. Altogether, I've been working in the industry for a little more than 8 years, both in media, creative, and strategy, on both agency and client side. So I know the struggles on the both sides of the aisle. And personally, I study behavioral economics. I minor in data analysis. So this is something I care about deeply, not just from the professional, but also from the academic point of view. So once again, tonight we're gonna talk about why you should spend more resources on brand and spend more time and attention thinking about brand activities. How can you measure, attribute, and predict your brand opportunities? And how can you implement this new approach to your daily life? Hopefully we will be done with the slides, with the presentation itself in 30 minutes, maybe 35. So you guys can ask me some questions at the end of the presentation. Let's go. First, let's talk about the brand formats itself and how can we prove it. So there's this famous quote, which actually, hopefully it's correctly attributed to John Wanamaker, which is considered to be the father, one of the first proto-advertisers, which is half the money I spent on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. Funnily enough, a person who, apologies, died more than 100 years ago, was able to formulate a problem that's still, relevant to this day. More than 100 years later, I feel like a lot of us still struggle with this, with exactly the same problem. We don't know. We know that not every campaign is successful, not every KPI is achieved, but we don't know why specifically. And I promise this is going to be the only cringy meme, but it's actually quite fun because companies both in the beginning and sort of like at the peak of their growth, they don't spend a lot of resources on measuring brand performance because they either don't care about to launch it altogether and they extremely uniquely performance focused, or they already at that point where everything they do is brand related. So, but a lot of our clients, a lot of companies find themselves in the middle where they need to juggle it too, where they need to juggle both performance and brand activities. So they need to somehow find a correlation between these two. And the problem with the performance-only approach, which obviously during the recession, a lot more companies have started to take on, is that the performance is not performing. Actually, it's been going quite poorly for quite a while, so much so that in the EU, Meta has launched a subscription. Like people actually have to pay 20 euros per month to use Instagram and Facebook because the ads are extremely ineffective due to safety regulations and data security regulation. So less and less publishers actually come to Meta and Google to publish ads. And it's important that even though we talk about performance as sort of like the end-all be-all tool for efficiency, actually it's the brand activity and it's the sort of like engaged audience from the brand activities and specifically influencer marketing that is the most engaged. We can prove this with numbers. The key number being is the conversion rate of the App Store. So we will be talking mostly about the apps on this webinar. As you can see, the general conversion rates for games in the US is more or less 2-4% for other sources, whereas for web referrals, as in for links from the web, which is most influencer marketing is a whopping 33.5%, and it's even higher for certain verticals of apps. So 10, almost 20 times higher. The audience is engaged, and the audiences that have worked with, that have seen your app, that have learned about your app from an influencer is more trustworthy. And sort of like it's the best well-kept secret. Everybody knows about this, but people often forget. And we use Pedro Pascal not just as a funny gif. There's actually a short case I want to give you just as an example of something extremely brand focused and seemingly inefficient and yet being able to deliver great business results. Actually, on our YouTube channel, we have a podcast episode where we discuss it more details. So technically, Merge mentioned Pedro Pascal launched a great campaign in March, which is extremely quote unquote inefficient because it's celebrities, it's videos, it's an offline event with influencers, it's PR post. So like all the channels are extremely hard to measure, hard to attribute. Like how do we actually get to the point B from here? Nevertheless, this campaign was able to bring great results. The obvious one are the boost in downloads. So like after every video publication, which would happen every week or so, you would get a great boost in downloads over the next 3-4 days, which is quite evident, but still it's important to highlight. Even though they didn't have the link to follow, they were able to find the app in the store. Another important stuff is that the quote-unquote organic downloads share also rose substantially by 5% over the active period of the campaign, and actually stayed a bit higher after the campaign, which is important. So once again, just because people don't have the link to follow and to open the page in the App Store doesn't mean that the people can't find your game. If they're invested by the ad, they will be able to find your application. And most importantly, because obviously when we talk about the quality of the audience, we talk about its revenue per downloads. We talk about the revenue that they bring to the game. That's extremely well. It's going extremely well too, because actually the revenue per download was consistent throughout the campaign. You can see there's a huge peak during the first week of May where there was an in-game event. Nevertheless, the average revenue per download was actually continued to grow during and after the campaign. So This is just a quick example of a campaign that works. It's a brand campaign, no performance, no sort of like link tracking or QR codes, but it works. And even though we know that performance is not as effective as it used to be several years ago, because we can't track people as well as we were able to, we know that the competitors around us keep launching brand campaigns like this one, or maybe the Diablo 4 campaign with Sarah Michelle Gellar. We know that the market keeps telling us that, especially during the days of recession, the creating future demand, is crucial, because people obviously gonna come out of this crisis. Nevertheless, the market still continues to be short term. There's an interesting white paper that was published today, so this is fresh off the press, by the guys from Superscale, that showed that 47%, almost half of the market, 47% of games die within a year. Die as in they're not being developed anymore, they're not being updated anymore. Probably players inside stop, bringing revenue anymore. So the market itself is extremely short term. And when it comes to legends like Raid or Hero Wars or Merge Dimensions, they are the exceptions rather than the norm in the market. And it's kind of hard. We can see that the quarter of people doesn't even try to predict lifetime value and return on ad spend. And the third of our market is going through the recession themselves. They're making layoffs, they're cutting budget. So the crisis is never the time to think short term, you need to think long term. Which is a great thing to say, but actually quite hard to prove. Like, how do we as an agency prove this to you? How do you, as an influencer marketing manager, bring me brand manager, prove this to your team? How can we link branded business? And how can we predict, hopefully, the results? Well, this is what we recommend. This is where Zorka shines, and this is actually the sort of like meat of this webinar. In advance, I'm going to say that these are only the just the five frameworks we decided to show right now, the ones we use more often, the ones we can see how can they be applied in your daily life, maybe tomorrow or starting next week. There are some other interesting frameworks that we use but don't share just yet, because we need to, make sure that they're universal enough. Feel free to screenshot the slides. Feel free, honestly, to screenshot every slide of this presentation, but because it's quite compact and hopefully interesting. If necessary, we will be able to send the PDF of this presentation to anyone who messages us on LinkedIn about this. So yeah, we're going to talk about media value. We're going to talk about the connection between awareness and key results. We're going to talk about the App Store lifts, the correct way to attribute installs, and the way to predict click-through rates for our bloggers. So let's start with the influencer media value. Awareness and key results. We're going to talk about the App Store lifts. No problem. So yeah, influencer media value is sort of a derivative of earned media value. If you work in PR or maybe work with somebody who did PR, you know that very well. As we discussed previously with the App Store engagement rates, and here, another proof. Influencer audience is extremely engaged and trusted. The way the reason influencer marketing works and performance doesn't anymore is mostly because of the banner fatigue, which is universal. Like, it's not so much banners anymore. It's about YouTube ads. It's about Google search ads. It's about like Twitter ads. Like, people are just tired of ads, period. And they still trust people. Even more so, for example, in case of the quote unquote macro influencers, people engage with sponsored posts more than they engage with general posts. So once again, we talk about rich quality, not just rich quantity. And it's important because we often try to prove that the reason we need to allocate budgets towards influencer marketing, and the reason why influencers cost more and are seemingly less efficient than just UA, is because of that higher quality, which is not always measured appropriately. And we argued, we were able to prove this with several clients, that if you actually measure how much money you would have needed to spend on UA to get the same quantity and quality of the reach, you'd actually have to spend way more. So we can actually measure with influencer media value and actually spend how much money you save your brand every time you launch an IM campaign. You can calculate it relatively easy. You just need to multiply the reach in thousands by the CPM. That's pretty universal. CPM of influencers is usually higher. So here you take a CPM of, I don't know, maybe Meta ad campaign or TikTok or Google. You just try to launch. You don't even need to launch. You just need to see what does the what does the campaign manager, or what CPM does the campaign manager offer to you for a similar audience? The same location, the same interest, the same maybe age and platform. And needless to say, that number has been growing for a while as well, at least maybe 20% over the last half a year. And not only that, but you also multiply the reach by one or several quality indices. So like we have developed several quality indices that try to measure the quality of the audience. And once again, feel free to message us for the template that you can use internally as well. And obviously those quality indexes are a bit, it depends on what specific promos and channels you use. The top three for us are integration length. For example, in YouTube, we found that unsurprisingly, the longer the integration is, the more effective it is. Specifically, we talk about dedicated video. It usually shows way higher CTRs and engagement levels. Influencers' engagement rate is usually a good sign of how engaged and active the audience is going to be on the App Store as well. And click-through rate is also like another metric by which you can sort of like tell the quality of the audience. It's up to you what metrics you want to use, how many metrics you want to use. Should you go from 1 to 5 and maybe from 1 to 2, by giving it another, like it doesn't have to be an integer. Nevertheless, it's a great way to account for the quality of the audience when presenting media plan to your team, and actually realize that even though influencer CPM might be a bit higher, it's actually lower if you were to spend the same amount of money on just purely UA channels. The second one is actually quite an interesting one because this is sort of like the underlying idea behind everything we do. Because we have the brand attributes, we have the awareness, and we have the business results. And the issue is always how do we link this to, like, how do we prove that investing in a brand brings financial results? It seems like there's no answer. It seems like there's a big black hole where everything goes and there's no results. Actually, it is. It's simply simple. Obviously, we're going to talk about how and why this doesn't work as easy as you want it to be, but you can actually find a correlation between the two. And it's relatively simple statistic formula. You can run linear or multilinear regression to find the sort of like the connection between the two. So if you know, for example, that your share of voice keeps rising and you can see the corresponding growth in market share, once you've done it several times, you can prove that yes, one leads to another. The same goes for many other brand attributes. Might it be the number of search queries, the aided awareness, unaided awareness, share of mind, top of mind. We were able to find both internally and on the market several studies that support this idea that there is a clear correlation between the two. And by working on brand attributes, for example, by working on brand awareness, we can predict what change it's going to make to the installs with the probability of, you see on the slides, like 90% and more, which is extremely high. So we're 94% sure, for example, that if we work on aided awareness of a certain app, we can guarantee a corresponding growth in the install base, which is actually very important. And there are other studies by Work, by Harvard Business Review that prove this idea as well. Once again, there's no universal answer what you need to measure. It all depends on you. If you have an app, obviously the installs might be the key business result you want to track, as well as maybe depositors rate, retention rate, or average revenue per paying user. When it comes to the brand results, once again, maybe share of search is not as relevant because people don't Google games. They just go to Apple Store and find them there. But you can use aided awareness, you can use top of mind, you can use share of voice. And once you find the two metrics that actually grow at similar rates to one another, you can use the data to prove the value brand activities have in your digital marketing activity. You can do it both ways. Ideally, you do it both ways at the same time. Internally, you can just collect data over a certain period of time. I suggest do it weekly even, or when it comes to brand attributes, it's better to measure them at least monthly, because obviously there needs to be a bit of time to change. Most brand lift studies do it quarterly. So like Q1, Q2, Q3 of the year, etc. And you can also find this for competitors. This usually requires an outside research. Like Zorka, for example, you can ask us to conduct a bespoke market research on you and your competitors, so we can find also the market share and the share of voice of you and the competitors, and see if there's any connection between the two. The third idea and the third framework that we've been using for quite a long time, and we enjoyed it, is the correct attribution of the IAM installs. So the problem with attribution is quite universal. Attribution models are changing because the ad networks are changing, because the channels are changing. The recent update to Scan 4 is also a big deal, because once again, advertisers have fewer and fewer possibilities and opportunities to actually track the audiences. So you need to make sure that you not just base your analysis of a campaign on the tracker themselves, but also on the so-called server-side data, as an App Store data, for example, maybe Google data looker. So analyze both income and outcome of the data to make sure that you see the correct results. Because what we found, and we've been using for quite a while, that there's a certain percentage of installs that do come from bloggers, do come from influencers, but are not tracked and therefore are not attributed correctly. This is just an example. Obviously, this is not real numbers, but for every 100 installs that we can track, there are from 30 to 40, let's say 35 untracked installs that have come from an influencer but weren't tracked due to one reason or another. And the way to measure it really quickly is to measure the average install rate of your app before a campaign, and then measure the installs during the campaign and after the campaign. And then just by seeing the difference, you will be able to find the discrepancy between the two. So if the difference is 135 installs and you've only checked 100 installs, obviously there's something wrong. Obviously something wasn't attributed correctly. The reasons why a lot of influencer marketing installs are not attributed correctly are threefold. At least the top three we found is that obviously it's the incorrect attribution by the in-app browser, because when you open a link on YouTube, for example, it's not the Safari that opens, it's the in-app browser that opens. And depending on what link shortener or maybe link tracker you're using, not always the link opens correctly. And actually Apple themselves, like on the bottom, you see two screenshots from the Apple website that says so as well. Like if you tabs from non-Safari web browser will be attributed to web, just web without resource. And if there's a chain of redirects, that also not necessarily will be able to show correct results. It will show you the last URL in the chain, which is not necessarily the correct one. The other reason is the UTM links, that they sometimes break, they sometimes don't work, they sometimes don't register. And the highest reason by far is the shared direct search. People watch and play on different devices, or sometimes they watch a video, they decide not to tap on the links directly, like during the video, but they decided to open the game afterwards. So we found over several campaigns with our partners that there's a huge boost in quote-unquote search traffic. Yeah, the traffic that came from App Store search during the IM campaigns, which comes from people searching for the games in the App Store instead of just clicking the link. Another important idea that actually follows up on this model is the way influencers can affect positively App Store performance or Play Store performance. This goes without saying, but I feel like we need to spell it out. Organic installs don't exist. Like, I don't believe it. Actually, a lot of the industry agrees that there's no such thing as just people randomly, stumbling onto your app, even if they found it on the App Store. There needs to be something that puts your app on the Today page. There needs to be some kind of activity. There are more than 1,000 apps being published on the App Store daily, so your app is just one of them. And there's no way you would get into like top 100, let alone top 10, without some serious ad spending. And once again, remember we talked about the higher engagement rates, higher conversion rates on the App Store from different sources. Web referrals is a thing, web referrals, the bloggers, but we can tell that on average, store search traffic grows by 5-6%, meaning that people learn about the game from the influencers, but they go to the store and they search for it. Sometimes it's the app referral because, once again, Google Chrome can be the referral, not a blogger themselves, depending on what apps person has on their phone, or maybe the store browse. But the influencers, they positively affect all the sources of acquisition, not just web referrals. And that's important to keep in mind. What you need to track, ideally, just to keep in mind on them, is the impressions, page visits, conversion rates, and downloads. So like the first 4 metrics you see in the App Store Connect. Ideally, you track them before, during, and after the campaign to see the difference. And you see these discrepancies between the tracked installs and clicks and page views and the general one. If you see there's a huge difference, if you see there are more people coming to see the App Store page from search or from the Today tab, you know that it's also can be partially, if not completely, attributed to influencer marketing. And the last one is kind of fun, but also extremely difficult because it requires a lot of experience, a lot of campaigns, having done a lot of campaigns and launches, is the connection between the creative and the CTR. The gift here is mostly to sort of like as a visual metaphor of traffic trying to go through a ever so small CTR, click-through rate and conversion rate. Like we need more traffic to come, so we need to make sure that CTR and CR are something we can influence, and they need to be higher. Usually we do this with A/B tests, so we know one idea is better than the other. We know that one blogger is a better performer than the other one, but we don't know what ideas actually work. We just know them in comparison. So the trick is learning to do this in absolute values. The way we do it, we use coefficients. So like a similar thing we use with influencer media value, we found to be extremely easy yet clear to use. So you define the basic CTR, which should be relatively low, because you should always come from the base of like the worst performing channel possible, so that later you can add on more opportunities. So let's say the CTR is 0.1%, 0.1%. You define several assets, several attributes and parameters of your campaign and see how well they influence the CTR. For example, once again, the length of a promo on YouTube influences positively or negatively. What assets do you use? Is there an in-app event during the same time? So like, for example, when an influencer is talking about your game, does he just say download, or there's a certain specific call to action, maybe unlock a new character or participate in this event that motivates people to download more? There are many other parameters. The one we try to use and we continue to use is the quote-unquote purity of an influencer. So if we see that an influencer has an ad in every video they post, and usually it's happening at the same time, like first 3 minutes of the video, we know that their audience is already has this knowledge, so already has some type of banner blindness. So decide to skip the ads altogether. So we know that the influencer, which is extremely active in integrations, will be less converting than an quote-unquote pure influencer, the one that doesn't post as much and doesn't have as many ads as another one. And it's important that those coefficients can be both positive and negative, or both at the same time, technically. For example, integration length, you can take the 60 seconds as the base, and you can go upwards. When it comes to, for example, how many influencers you have at your campaign, if you have just 1, 2, 3 influencers, they might not work as well as they work in a bunch, because usually people get to follow several similar channels, and if you target a specific audience, there is a high probability of audience matching, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it also leads to higher conversion rate and engagement rate. And it can also be just a negative. Maybe you can have some noise. For example, if we find that a blogger, that a YouTuber has shown an ad from our competitor, we know that it's a negative factor. We know that it will negatively affect our performance. So we analyze that as well. And when it comes to CTR, you can either sum the coefficients or multiply them. Important to remember that multiplying implies a compound effect. So if the video is dedicated and it has certain assets and it has a game event, obviously those three will work together better than just, they will be bigger than the sum of their parts. And that's important to remember. So this is once again a simple example of how this works. We know that we're launching a 2-minute integration, which usually converts a bit better. We don't have a specific offer, so we just offer to download the game without any, unique call to action, which is the negative thing. We know that other ads are present, although not as much, so this doesn't influence, the CTR technically. And we also were able to speak with the YouTuber and ask him to leave the link to the App Store in the pinned comment. So this is the first thing that all the viewers will see. And this usually positively influences their CTR. So by adding up or multiplying all those factors, we can predict what the CTR is going to be, which later allows us to predict number of clicks, number of installs, cost per install, pretty much the whole campaign. And once again, those of you who find this a bit daunting or maybe exciting, actually, feel free to DM us for template available both for Excel and Google Sheet, where you'll be able to try this out for yourself and maybe update this with your numbers. So why use this? Once again, these are not just five random mechanics, 5 random models. All of them have a specific goal, specific purpose. Media value shows you how efficiently and effectively you're using the marketing budget. So this is what you use when you need to prove to your team members that your ad spend was efficient, even though it might be in the absolute numbers, it might be a bit higher than quote unquote performance. By finding the connection, the correlation between awareness and goals, you can prove that your brand activities influence the business goals of the company. By measuring the App Store lift, you can see how your brand activities influence quote unquote organic downloads. Once again, I don't believe they exist. Attribution is crucially important because that's how you define the KPI, that's how you find the correct number of installs, the correct cost per install, the correct ROI, so that's crucial. And CTR prediction is just a great way to see if you launch a non-typical creative campaign, like maybe a special project, how well it will actually perform. So now that you have this knowledge, how do you make this work? How do you actually apply this in your daily life? So it's relatively easy and hard because once again, it seems evident, but usually we, always forget to start the Google Sheet, always forget to have a call with the team after a campaign. But it's important that you track everything you do and you single out the metrics you care about the most and you track them regularly and you keep them all in the same file. You analyze them, you deconstruct them into switchable parts, you confirm what you've been doing, because maybe what once or twice might just be happy coincidence. If you do it several times, you can prove that this actually works and this actually doesn't work. And then you repeat. And actually, when you repeat and you'll be able to predict campaigns with higher performance, it will be easier for you to, prove your value and the value of what you're doing to the team members and get access to bigger opportunities, because you'll be able to allocate the budget more efficiently and be able to predict results of your campaign more accurately. So tracking, once again, we highly recommend cohort analysis. Cohorts are users grouped together by certain attribute. In this case, it's the week when they downloaded the game or downloaded the app. You will be able to see the changes in real time, which is often important. I also will be able to see the compound effects of branding. For example, the average conversion rate might be 20% during 2023 and 25% during 2024. So you will be able to say this is not just organic. This is something your brand was able to achieve. Then you need to analyze. Once again, you single out outliers, you single out trends. You can see some weeks perform better, some weeks before perform worse, and you correlate that with whatever the campaign was doing at the time. Was there an in-game event? Was there a specific type of influencer? Maybe there was a problem on the UTM tracking, you weren't able to attribute the insults correctly, etc. Then when you have the two events, once again, for example, you realize that in-game events influence CTR positively. You need to prove this. Just coincidence is not enough. You need to be able to prove this. So you run A/B tests when possible. Obviously, we talk about the actual budget. It's sort of like we can't allocate brand budget and hypothesis, but we can run certain campaigns, separate campaigns with and without this parameter. So to be able to prove them later. For example, for our model, where we're able to find that in-game event usually adds 0.11% to the CTR after having run more than 20 campaigns for different genres, different brands, similar, however, in the audience. We compared the CTRs with and without in-game event, and we saw there was an average difference of 0.11%. So that's why we're confident enough, and we've seen this in action work, that in-game events influence positively CTR. And then you need to repeat it. Once you learn certain tricks about what you're doing, you're able to use them in your prediction. You're able to guarantee to your teammates that what you're doing actually works. And then when you deliver on your promise, you get higher trust level from your audience, from your team members, to maybe try something more, something new. And the positive cycle continues because first and foremost, you deliver higher value to your team members as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I understand that this might be a bit too much because I try to be as cohesive and compact as possible. Sorry if I was speaking too loud and too quick. But yeah, it's easier to do it with us, not just by yourself. We have an efficiency calculator that we've been trying out with our trusted partners and trusted clients. We offer a bespoke version, so we'll create a specific version just for you, your titles, your specific situation, your language, even if it's necessary. And that's important because you will be able to predict CPMs, CTRs, in-app revenue. You will be able to learn the campaign results, or at least be able to predict the campaign results even before launching the campaign. And that's an extremely potent power that a lot of people try to get. This is what it might look like. Once again, this is extremely dummy looking. You'll be able to choose a country, you choose a segment, you choose a promo time. This is for YouTube, for example. And you will be able to get your effective CPM, number of clicks and installs, your App Store conversion rate, your CPI, and if you provide your internal data, for example, average revenue per paid user just per download, we'll be able to also show you the ROI and the potential revenue you might get from a campaign. So that's quite exciting. And obviously this is just a demo version. We do have a specific sort of more advanced, but we offer for our clients a Google Sheet page just because it's universal. Everybody knows how to use this. There's no learning curve. You just open a file. You maybe spend 5-10 minutes learning what you need to insert and what you actually don't need to touch, what cells are better left untouched, and then it's ready to go. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much. I'm trying to be as compact and useful as possible. No water, no sort of mindless chatter. If you have any questions, I'm not sure if I can see them yet, but I will be able to answer them. Feel free to ask them now, or maybe send us a message on LinkedIn later, and we'll share with you any data necessary. I'll see if I have any question. Maybe my team will be able to send them on Teams, on Slack. But as of right now, I'm assuming everything's nice, and I was able to be as clear as possible. And that's pretty much it. Also, I need to remember that I need to remind you that this will be recorded later. We will publish the subtitles. in English and Chinese. Maybe other languages are necessary, so you'll be able to watch this later and, revisit some important points. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for being here with us. Please make sure to follow Zorka on LinkedIn. We do this quite often. We have interesting articles, webinars, presentations. We share a lot of exciting data and cases, so feel free to join us. Yeah, thank you guys so much.